Hi and welcome, here's May, and in this video I'm gonna show you a nice exercise you can do when drawing from reference to test your observation skills. Let's start. The exercise consists of these different steps. First, you do a sketch from reference, while the reference is not the same size as your canvas or drawing. Then secondly, you do a sketch next to the reference. You can check the proportions on the way up this way. You could also put the reference underneath the drawing to have a horizontal reference. And thirdly, you do corrected proportions, where you duplicate your drawing from reference, then you put it on top of the reference by partly tracing, partly transforming, or partly redrawing. You correct the proportions. The way I set this up is that I made a grid with 4 columns, also 4 rows, but you could also do fewer rows, and for each column I had one of the different steps and also one column with the reference. There are 2 different ways you can use this exercise. First, you can either figure out your own tendencies when drawing from a reference, and secondly, you can also retrain your observation if you want to draw the same proportions as in the image. By correcting, you find out what you missed and got wrong. You can see patterns if you want to. You can then keep the mistakes you make or the way you tend to stylize in mind while drawing. The reference you can see me drawing from in this video are from some ensemble star cards. Lately I've been interested in ensemble stars because of Instagram edits I saw, and I thought the artwork of the cards and how the characters looked was really pretty. It's important to study from real life and study the fundamentals in general, but also studying from other artists and art styles you like to really define your own art style and learn new approaches to draw and explore the stylization methods is important as well. As an artist, it's always a good idea to study references you like. Your own style gets influenced by all the references you take in. In my references, the characters are wearing clothes, and by using poses where you can't see every outline of a character's anatomy, I find that it also tests your own understanding of anatomy or where parts of the human body are. For example, with jackets and white pants, you can see the general placement of body parts, but not their outlines, meaning you have to use your own knowledge of how body parts would look like without the clothes to draw the pose. I always draw the pose without clothes first and then add them later on, even if I also want to draw the outfit that's used in the reference, just to make sure the anatomy of my drawing looks at least okay. I recommend doing this to just get familiar and practice your understanding of the human body. However, really experienced artists can also be able to comprehend what the body looks like in their head and directly draw a fully clothed figure, which I find amazing. But if you, for example, draw a big sweater without understanding where the body is underneath it, it can lead to your drawing looking proportionally off in the end. If you really struggle with figuring out where body parts are, I recommend just drawing from not clothed figures or just references with skin-tight clothes, or even studying anatomy in general. There are also a lot of pose reference sheets artists made where you can get an understanding of the human body without needing actual human references. This also helps with learning how you can simplify human anatomy in your drawings. Also, if you draw stylized characters and from references with heavily stylized proportions, you can train yourself to use similar proportions as they do in there and learn those proportions this way. While doing this exercise, the recurring mistakes I made or tendencies I had while drawing were that often my body wasn't foreshortened enough, and for example only the hand or something like that was really foreshortened while the arm wasn't enough. Also, oftentimes when the character was tilted in some way, my initial drawing turned out not tilted enough. I mostly just drew the pose like the person is standing. Also, my faces are often pretty flat when their perspective should be more from above or below. I don't put that into my drawing as much as I should. Then also the character in general turned out too thin, but I would say that's more of a stylistic tendency, since overall the whole body was still proportional. It was only thinner, so you could see it as a mistake, but you could also see it just as a stylistic tendency. Here it often just depends on how you want to use this exercise. Do you want to copy the exact proportions, or do you just want to make sure that your bodies overall portray the same pose as in your reference? While doing this exercise, you can easily figure out your own stylistic choices. Now, to further explain my drawing process, I'll go over an example of the poses I drew in real time. Okay, in this reference the character is sitting and the angle is more from below, and you can see I start with the head and then what connects to the head, which was the hand in this example, and I also tend to draw the neck at first always. I tilted my canvas to make the whole drawing the body easier because the whole character was tilted in the reference as well. You can see I generally started with the arms and the hands because they also were kind of connected to each other, and both arms formed this kind of small triangle. Then I did the legs. And finally here I'm adding the face. You can already see that this face has the mistake of not being that much from below. And here I'm doing the next to the reference drawing. And for this I don't tilt my canvas since I'm mainly focusing on the outlines and just getting them into the correct place. And while doing this I always tend to just look to the side and then back to my drawing. Are the general parts at the same position? But my overall process while doing this was very similar, starting out with the head and ending with the face. And now you'll see me correcting the proportions. I duplicate the drawing and then try to put it in a good position so that most body parts that are similar are overlapping, but you can already see how my character doesn't really match all the proportions of the original drawing. I ended up deleting the whole face since I didn't draw it tilted enough. The head was too straightforward. My torso was too much to the right and I transformed it to the left, and you can see the left hand, for example, was then too far down, and I end up mostly redrawing the pieces instead of just transforming them. For the legs, I only corrected the lower parts of it, and that's how I then corrected the proportions. And you can see that mostly the differences were just with generally my face being a little bigger proportionally to the body than in the reference, which is also a stylistic choice I often tend to make. But you can also see it as a mistake depending on what you want to focus on. And when drawing from reference, I often look for connections or relationships between different body parts. You can, for example, ask yourself these questions while drawing. Where are the hands related to the face? How much space is in between one body part and one other? Do body parts form a shape? And this is generally what you develop or learn to get better at when you draw more and more from observations while focusing on shapes and outlines. And as you could see with the example, my own process tends to be like this. I start with the head and neck. Then, depending on the pose, I add the shoulders and arms or the torso, and I end off with the legs. And afterwards I do fingers and other details, and finally the face. But often I change up my process depending on the reference to draw parts that connect, and I might just draw fingers and the whole hand directly in the beginning if it is a foreshortened hand and rather big in the drawing. In general, starting with big shapes and the big parts and then adding details makes the process faster most of the time, since then you can spot bigger mistakes earlier on and fix them. If you, for example, were to draw all the details of the face at first and then you realize the overall face shape doesn't work, you might have to change all the facial features as well, or with hands you might have to change all fingers if you drew it completely detailed directly. This is why first drawing the base palm and then the fingers and finally adding knuckle indications is the process I mostly use when drawing hands. It really depends on you as a person how you want to draw from reference, if you always want to use the same process or if you want to just go intuitively all the time. But that's it for the video. You can comment some methods you'd like to use while drawing from reference or observation, and your own stylistic tendencies if you want to. I hope this video was interesting, and if you like the content I make, you can like and subscribe. It means a lot to me, and thanks for watching. Bye!